All right, guys, we're going to read Chapter 10, Taking a Licking. They traveled for a long time. Lefty was driving very carefully, making sure he kept the big truck within the speed limit. From his perch up in the bunk, Mac was keeping a watchful eye on their route. Henry tried to keep watch too, but as the hours flew by, he found himself nodding. He was soon asleep, his head cradled on Mac's chest. As the first streaks of dawn appeared in the eastern sky, the big man was still holding his arms about the boy, cushioning his body from the shocks and jolts of the road. As the truck shifted gears and slowed, Henry's eyes opened. Mac whispered, a finger held to his lips. "Where are we?" Henry whispered in return. Mac put his mouth almost against Henry's ear before he answered. "Far out in the country," he said, "a long way from nowhere." "Now, when we get where we're going," he continued, "I want you to keep a sharp eye on me. Don't do anything sudden and don't run. Let's just be very careful. Dear?" Henry nodded. He would follow Mac's lead and do as he was told. The big man was a person you could trust, especially in a tight spot. They were traveling along a 2-lane road now, with just a few houses set wide apart. Lefty was driving the big truck very slowly, looking right and left at every crossroad. "Any time now, we're going to turn off," Mac whispered. Henry agreed. They thought they must be very close to the thieves' hideout. Lefty slowed the truck almost to a crawl and turned down a small dirt road. The truck bounced along the narrow track, turning right and left through the trees, and in a few minutes came to a stop in a grove of pines near a small wooden cabin. When Lefty had turned off the motor, Louie called up to them, "Gentlemen, we have arrived. Last stop, everybody, off." Lefty and Louie opened the cab doors and stepped down out of the truck. "Easy now, you two," Louie said as Mac and Henry joined them. "No sudden moves, no funny business. No tricks, right?" "No tricks," Mac said quietly. Louie had sitting there with him next to Henry where he could see. It had one room and dirty, desolate-looking cabin sitting before them. A wooden table and chair stood in one corner, and Louie prodded Mac and Henry in that direction. There were no windows in the cabin and no light either, until Louie lit a small lantern that hung from the rafters. Lefty pulled a chair over near the door and sat there, watching carefully. "Well now," Mac said, "what comes next?" "What comes next is up to you," Louie said. "Play it smart and we leave you here when the job's over. Give us trouble and just don't give us any trouble." With that, Louie drew a chair over near Lefty, and the two of them fell into a quiet conversation. Lefty was angry, that much was clear. "What do we do with a load of candy?" they heard him say. Louie spent most of his energy trying to keep Lefty calm. "Looks like our friends over there bought a pack of trouble," Mac said to Henry. "Instead of furs, they got something they don't want." "Ha ha ha," said Henry, and they both had a quiet chuckle, followed by several minutes of quiet giggles. When their mirth had subsided, Henry asked Mac what was really going to happen. "I don't know," Mac said, "except for this. If either one of them tries to put a hand on you, I will personally lay them out flat. So don't you worry, hear?" There was a kind of iron in Mac's voice now, and Henry was sure that when the moment came, the big man would be ready for it. Just then, out of the corner of his ear, Henry heard a faint and faraway sound. It could have been a dog barking. Mac heard it too, and the two of them sat quietly listening. It was barking all right, but now there seemed to be 2 dogs barking. Mac put his hand on Henry's arm. "No noise now," he said. "Listen." The barking got louder and closer. As the seconds ticked by, Louie and Lefty had heard it too. They stood near the closed door listening for all they were worth. You had to be deaf not to hear the chorus of yelps and yowls. It was getting louder and louder with every moment. "Keep them covered," Louie shouted against the din. "I'm going to see what's happening." Lefty shuffled over to the corner where Mac and Henry sat. Louie opened the door and froze on the spot, but only for a split second. For at that exact moment, a big German Shepherd came sailing through the doorway and landed on Louie's chest. Louie was knocked flat on his back. Behind the German Shepherd came a whole army of yelping, barking dogs, all heading straight for Henry. Airedales, Dobermans, a brown and white collie, several spaniels and setters, and a small French poodle. They were yelping and jumping and barking enough to fill the little cabin with noise and confusion. Lefty was stunned, speechless. absolutely confused. A dog riot that was taking place right before him. But Mac knew what he was about. In a flash, he pounced on Lefty. Then he leaped to where Louie had fallen and scooped it up. Mac whirled to face the pair of confused crooks. Louie was still on the floor. Lefty was surrounded by a pack of yipping, yapping dogs. Even if he wanted to run, he couldn't. Henry, of course, was the star attraction for the animal army. They were licking him as if he were some sort of new dog yummy. His arms and leg and face were covered with happy, licking dogs. And all of it made him laugh so hard he could scarcely protest. While this was going on, still more dogs were racing into the tiny cabin, and behind them came most people. Most of them with leashes in their hands, and all of them with the same puzzling story. They had been out walking with their dogs, and one after another, the animals had put their noses in the air, sniffed wildly, and then began racing madly along the dirt road, as if following an irresistible scent. Now, what could have made those animals behave so strangely? And what about those guys? What was going on in this cabin anyway? Why did the place smell like a chocolate shop? It took about an hour and the arrival of the police to sort it all out. Mac had a lot of explaining to do, but when it was over, Louie and Lefty were handcuffed. As they were being led away, Henry heard Lefty mutter, "We go after furs and we get candy bars. We get to our hideout and we're invaded by dogs. We get to our hideout and then it's getting so that a guy can't make a dishonest living anymore." "Ha ha," said Mac and Henry together. As the police car turned out of sight at the end of the tree-lined dirt road, they were still laughing. "Come on, kid," said Mac between chuckles. "We've got some candy to deliver." All right, chapter 11 tomorrow, next Tuesday. Bye, guys.